My favorite thing about all these leftist news sources is the fact that they literally say, "She lied about the assault and steering wheel incident, but everything she says shows." Then babble for minutes trying to stretch the narrative as far as it will go. They're going to pick apart her story. The Secret Service says she's lying, what's to pick apart? And then I said something to the effect of, "Loony leftists are idiots." Secret Service plans to respond to January 6 committee regarding Trump's actions after Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. By Nicole Skanga, Victoria Albert. June 28, 2022. 10:32 p.m. CBS News. The U.S. Secret Service will have more to say to the January 6 House Select Committee after former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony Tuesday regarding former President Trump's actions related to January 6, 2021. In a hearing announced at the last minute, she told the committee of Trump's desire to go to the Capitol with his supporters while Congress was in a joint session counting the electoral ballots. The United States Secret Service has been cooperating with the Select Committee since its inception in spring 2021, and will continue to do so, including by responding on the record to the committee regarding the new allegations surfaced in today's testimony, Secret Service spokesperson Anthony Guglielmi said in a statement to CBS News. Hutchinson testified before the committee that she spoke with White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations Tony Ornato in a room with Robert Engel, the Secret Service special agent in charge on January 6. According to Hutchinson, during the meeting, Ornato conveyed that the president became irate in his vehicle when he was told he could not go to the Capitol. He said something to the effect of, "I'm the fucking president, take me up to the Capitol now," Hutchinson said. When informed that he had to return to the West Wing, Trump reached up to the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel, prompting Engel to grab his arm. Hutchinson said she was told by Ornato. The president then used his free hand to lunge towards Engel, she said, noting that Ornato motioned towards his clavicles when describing the incident. Hutchinson added that Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of what Ornato said. However, a source close to the Secret Service confirmed to CBS News that Engel and the driver are prepared to testify under oath that neither man was physically attacked or assaulted by Trump and that the former president never lunged for the steering wheel of the vehicle. The Secret Service officials do not dispute that Trump was irate or that he demanded to be taken to the Capitol, in the language that Hutchinson related to the committee. The Secret Service has provided dozens of hours of testimony to the January 6 committee so far, dating back to spring 2021. According to the source close to the agency, both Ornato and Engel have appeared before the committee on the record and behind closed doors, at the committee's request. Those sessions were recorded, but not used in Tuesday's hearing.
That stunning testimony during yesterday's January 6 hearing. The Secret Service says it will cooperate with the January 6 committee under oath after those shocking allegations made by Cassidy Hutchinson, who testified that former President Trump was violent with his own Secret Service agents.
The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
A story we have not heard until now. Let's bring in ABC News Chief Investigative Reporter Josh Margolin. So, Josh, what is the Secret Service saying about Hutchinson's story? Are they saying that the details are true? And will these agents actually testify under oath and tell the committee exactly what happened in their own words?
Hi, Kira. Well, first of all, it's not clear that the agents will, in fact, testify. We know that the Secret Service has said they would, and they would testify under oath. We don't know if there are any conditions. We don't know if their testimony is going to be in public, and we don't know if their testimony is going to be complete. Also, we don't actually know if they're going to confirm the details, those specific details that you just showed in terms of the episode inside the SUV. Because remember, when Cassidy Hutchinson was testifying yesterday, she was talking about a story about the events as she had been told. Most of her testimony focused on what she knew, what she heard, what she saw herself. But that anecdote was what was relayed to her. So it's not clear that all of those specific details are going to be confirmed. The most important thing that came out of yesterday's testimony is the core of what she testified to, that the White House and the Secret Service were aware of the severity and the seriousness of the threats facing Congress and the Capitol going into January 6th, and that those threats focused on people that wanted to breach the complex and do it with weapons, period.
And it was interesting, when she also was describing this event where she was getting a story from another person telling a story, right? She talked about this happening in the Beast, but the president wasn't in the Beast. He wasn't in the limo, which is referred to as the Beast. He was in the SUVs. So could that be something that might stand out as a possible discrepancy? Again, you pointed out she was just telling a story of a story she was told, right? So little details can get mixed up in stories.
Oh, absolutely. And we know that with something like this, with testimony that's so explosive and information that's so potentially game-changing in terms of the overall story of what she said, that people that want to criticize her will nitpick and will find any single discrepancy or question of fact to hang their hat on. But what was really important, Kira, you saw this yesterday in real time, and then we've seen it now for 24 hours. The issues that are being raised, the holes that people are trying to poke in Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony are very, very small. They don't get at the core, which is that Donald Trump was aware of the threat. His people were aware of the threat. The threat was directed at Congress, and it was violent. That is really the explosive, nexus point to the whole thing.
Well, it's interesting, too, the president seemed unfazed by the rioters. He was unfazed by the fact that there were people showing up there at the Ellipse where he was speaking with weapons. Right. According to Hutchinson, he was saying, they're not going to hurt me personally. I'm not concerned about that. What does that tell us about his intent that day, what he planned on doing? I mean, if this is all true, it sounds like he was just ready to march right with them, weapons and all, and see what happens.
But more than that, what it says, there's no other way to read it or to hear it than if he knows what their intent was, and then he knows that their intent was not to harm him, he knows that their intent was to harm someone else. And who was that someone? And clearly, the whole body of her testimony yesterday, over the 2 hours, and then the depositions that she gave prior to that, says that Trump was aware they were coming armed, they weren't going to pose a threat to him, but the threat that they were going to pose was the threat down the road a mile on Capitol Hill, where the action was being conducted that he disapproved of. And as you say, she went over and over again, and this anecdote about Trump possibly having an altercation with the Secret Service agents, that's all about the idea of him going to the Capitol. He wanted to go and potentially lead his followers in a show of force and protest about what was going on Capitol Hill, which was the certification vote. And we know that the Secret Service yesterday, in their limited response, they didn't confirm the details of the alleged altercation. They did confirm that the agents told Trump at the time they did not want to drive him up to the Capitol. It was not secure. They were taking him back to the White House, which means they knew that the Capitol was not secure for somebody under Secret Service protection. It was really just an extraordinary day.
Right. And the Secret Service, too, saying he definitely was upset. The president was upset. They just didn't confirm the lunging.
Exactly. That really is the only thing.
Right. Okay, so finally, what do we learn about the response from Capitol Police and the FBI, you think, after the hearing yesterday?
It confirms what we've now heard over the last year and a half. In the immediate aftermath, there was this rush to say, we didn't know, we didn't have the right intelligence, we wish we would have known more information. And that preliminary spin that we got on January 7th, January 8th, January 10th, that all has washed away. Point after point after point, we've learned that they knew of information, the law enforcement agencies, and now yesterday it brings it on home. It says that not only did the Secret Service know about the threat in advance and the severity of it, but the White House operations staff knew about it. Mark Meadows was aware of it as the chief of staff and potentially the president. And if they were aware of it, then it may well be that they wanted it to happen.
Josh Margolin, great conversation. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Kira.
The United States Secret Service is in the spotlight now. Cassidy Hutchinson testified that then President Trump was, quote, irate when he was told by the Secret Service agents that he could not go to the Capitol on January 6th because it was not safe. Listen.
The president said something to the effect of, I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now. To which Bobby responded, sir, we have to go back to the West Wing. The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol. Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Ornato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
So officials say the Secret Service agents involved that she's talking about, both Engel and Ornato, are ready to testify under oath, and that they do dispute her account, 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 and that they do dispute her account. Our CNN security correspondent, Josh Campbell, has more. Josh, I mean, isn't it just so clear the American people need to hear from them under oath if they're disputing this?
That's right. I mean, Poppy, there were several stunning revelations from this hearing yesterday, including this alleged incident inside the up-armored presidential SUV as he was leaving that rally. And as she just testified there, Cassidy Hutchinson, she said that she was later told by a man named Tony Ornato, who was then the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. He's now a senior executive with the U.S. Secret Service. She says that Ornato told her that this incident occurred. Now, afterwards, an official with the Secret Service told me that Tony Ornato denies briefing her on this, telling her that this transpired. It's also worth pointing out that according to this official, the lead Secret Service agent who was inside the vehicle denies that this incident ever occurred. Now, we're told that the Department of Homeland Security reached out to the January 6th Select Committee and said that these witnesses are willing to come testify to refute some of this testimony. We did get a statement, our colleague Ryan Nobles from the committee. I'll read you part of it. They say that the committee trusts the credibility of a witness who is willing to testify under oath and in public, but is also willing to hear any and all information that others may have that would aid in the investigation. So clearly, the Secret Service pushing back on this, saying that according to Ornato and these other officials, this didn't happen. It's also worth pointing out, though, that Cassidy Hutchinson is the only person who has testified in her own name under oath, under penalty of perjury. And so her lawyer is saying that the Secret Service needs to come forward and testify under oath if they are refuting this. Finally, Poppy, it's also worth pointing out that obviously we need to get the bottom of this incident. Obviously, an irate president allegedly assaulting his own security detail. But we can't lose sight of the fact that I think the biggest issue here is that no witness has disputed that Trump still wanted to go to the U.S. Capitol, knowing that there were armed people inside that crowd, leading this crowd, this angry crowd, towards the U.S. Capitol where those votes were being counted. So again, although it's important to get to the bottom of what happened inside the Suburban, no one is disputing that even after knowing that this crowd was dangerous, Trump still wanted to lead him to the Capitol.
I think that's certainly the key here, right? And the president, her testimony saying that President Trump said, get rid of the magnetometers. I'm not worried about armed people in this rally. They're not going to hurt me. But what about everyone else inside the Capitol? Josh, thank you very much. Joining me now is Elliot Williams, a CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor, and Mike Mantranga, a former Secret Service agent who worked the presidential detail. He is now the CEO of the M6 Global Defense Group. Thanks very much. And Mike, just a few quick questions for you on this before we get to you, Elliot, on these big legal questions that Josh raised. Given all that we've just heard and given Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony, specifically about what happened in the Beast with the presidential detail, you know both Tony Ornato and you know Robert Engel personally. What is your reaction to what you've heard and their disputes of this account?
Correct. Yes. Thanks for having me. I would say that moving forward, I think what would be appropriate is that we all just take a tactical pause and wait to hear the accounts of Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel. If there's anybody who understands the importance of testifying under oath, it's both of those individuals. And so, from my perspective, just looking at, that there's no doubt that I think that the president probably at the time was angry, given the circumstances. But if there's disputes from both Tony Ornato and Bobby Engel that this did not happen, I would like to hear that. And I will tell you that I know both of these individuals. I know Tony Ornato better than Bobby Engel. If they dispute it, I have no reason to question either one of those gentlemen, as they are both of upstanding moral character.
Just to be clear here, until they go under oath and testify, I think importantly in front of the American people, not just in a deposition or behind closed doors, she is the one, Ms. Hutchinson is the one who Elliot Williams is under oath and said all of this under oath. But Elliot, to the broader point here, which is the testimony that the president knew there were armed masses, things like flagpoles with spears on the end, the call you heard in the testimony of someone in the trees with multiple AR-15s, knew this, then said, let's get rid of the magnetometers, let them in, they're not going to hurt me, in the same speech where former President Trump said, march to the Capitol and, quote, fight like hell. If that's true, he said that. If the testimony is true, he said that knowing about all of these armed folks. Legally, would that change things for the former president?
Look, it changes things insofar as it makes him more likely to be charged with a crime. But I think what the president's defense is that the president was obsessed with crowd size going back to his swearing in. If you remember the inauguration in 2017, we had a week of debate over the president fighting and lying about the size of the crowd there. That's what his defense would be. Now, I think it's more likely to end in a criminal charge here on account of the fact that, number one, there were warnings from the White House counsel and other people that there would have been violence. Number two, there were warnings about people being armed. But again, Poppy, we've talked about this sort of as a nation over the last couple of weeks, what it takes to win a criminal trial and what it takes to convince the American public that, number one, someone did something really bad and shouldn't be president again, are just two different standards. And that's the burden that the Justice Department or any prosecutor is going to have to hit here.
It's very true. Speaking of convincing a jury and speaking of lawyers, let's talk about White House counsel Pat Cipollone. I mean, earlier this week, we were saying it's pretty important that he testify. Is it not?
Yeah.
Listen to this, and on the other side, I want you to answer how much more important that testimony to the American people just became. Here it is.
I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
And do you remember which crimes Mr. Cipollone was concerned with?
In the days leading up to the 6th, we had conversations about potentially obstructing justice or defrauding the electoral count.
Elliot?
That is just devastating to hear, and we have to hear from Pat Cipollone. Here's the thing. One of the main argument he's making, and rightfully so, for not testifying is that, well, I was the White House counsel, and I'm going to have some levels of attorney-client or executive privilege. The problem here for him is that the things he's talking about there aren't in the scope of his job as White House counsel. He's saying to a colleague, look, we might be charged with crimes. And so he could very narrowly tailor the things that he comes in to testify about. And it's number one, did you warn your colleagues that they could be charged with crimes? I don't see any real attorney-client privilege based on his job as White House counsel there. So he's got to come in. This is important for the American
And he
people.
also has Fifth Amendment protection if there are those questions that he feels like are too broad and within the scope of privilege that he doesn't have to answer. But just quickly, Mike, before we go, I just wonder your reaction as someone who has served with these folks, who has served to protect the president, to what happened yesterday, what we heard.
You know, from my perspective, you know, the question is always, is there two sides to every story? And the answer is always yes. And I'm not questioning.
Yeah, but there's one
you know,
truth. There's one truth.
Right, there's one truth, and I'm not questioning the testimony of Ms. Hutchinson, what she may have heard and what she may have, you know, heard that was implied, may be very accurate according to her statements. But, you know, like I said, I would caution the American people that before we rush to judgment, let's hear from Tony Ornato, let's hear from Bob Engel, and let's hear what they have to say to see if they can corroborate her story. And so, you know, like I said, there's no doubt in my mind that the president was probably very angry. You know, do I think that the president lunged towards the steering wheel and put his hands on Bobby Engel? I would say that that's highly unlikely, but I'm not going to discount that account either until we hear from either one of those
but
gentlemen.
If I can
Yeah,
say one
Elliot.
thing, if I can say one quick thing, that is a factual dispute that speaks to her credibility as a witness. It's something that the committee has to clean up. This happens in criminal trials where your witness just says something that's contradicted. But don't lose the forest for the trees here. And what you saw were 2 hours of testimony with a lot of corroborated facts over the course of 5 prior hearings before that with a lot of corroborated facts. It's, you know, again, I think it's important to clear this up, right? Because, you know, it's factual testimony. But at the end of the day,
right.
this whole, it can't hinge on this. Yeah.
If you have a president that's acting in that manner, it needs to be disclosed.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not disputing that at all. I think that it took a tremendous amount of courage on her behalf to come before the panel yesterday and say what she said. She's to be commended about that.